Hi, everybody, and welcome. It is what I like to call Friday Eve. That does not mean that it's Friday. It means it's Thursday Eve before Friday, which is always a great prospect, right? You're almost at the end of the week, and boy, was it ever a big day. Big day for the true crime community, because something we've been waiting for 2.5 years finally happened. The judge in the Bryan Kohberger quadruple murder case in Idaho finally lifted the gag order, the thing that has kept you and me from knowing about this monster. What he did, why he did it, why he picked those 4 kids, how he went about those hideous and atrocious murders. But do not hold your breath that you're about to get an avalanche of information, because as always, there's a hiccup. I'm going to explain it all to you, and it actually does make a lot of sense, even though it's hard to hear. But long story short, you will get most of the information. It just might take months. And it will certainly take another week before you get much of anything. I'll explain all that in just a moment. But then I've also got this. There is a little quiet, serene, bucolic community in the state of Maine where people go for the, I don't know, beauty of it all, family environment, the community. But when Sunshine Stewart was murdered out on her paddleboard, all that was shattered, and everyone wanted to know, who did this? It doesn't happen here. Well, it turns out last night they hauled somebody in. And wouldn't you know it, the community should feel a lot better if they got a murderer on the loose back behind bars. The problem is, they won't say who it is. And they won't say much of anything else about the guy they hauled in. I will explain all that in just a moment. And then if you were just watching Leland, it's the cringe video I literally cannot stop watching. You know, cheaters usually hide in public, but this couple decided to go into a very, very public environment, a concert venue where Coldplay was playing. And as Chris Martin does, he likes to spotlight his fans in the stands. Here's how it went for the happy couple.
Yeah. Oh, look at these two. All right, come on. You're okay? Oh, what?
I always love the fact that there's like a 2-second delay. So they're going about their business before they actually know their business is everybody's business. Here's the question. You heard Leland when he put up the statement that the CEO blamed Coldplay, blamed the Jumbotron. Does he have any right to do that? Does he have any right to be angry at a spotlight that suddenly showed his very private moment? I'm going to explain all that for you in just a moment. Let's start here, though. For the first time since January 2023, which was just after Bryan Kohberger was arrested, attorneys, police, and other officials connected to the Idaho quadruple murders are finally free, legally free, to talk about the case in public. On camera, online, in print, in the town square, wherever and however they like. And that cheer that you may have heard from newsrooms across the country and fans of public, not hooded justice, it erupted when the judge in Boise, Idaho, lifted that dreaded gag order this morning, technically called a non-dissemination order. Whatever you want to call it, it's kept all official sources on the perplexing murder case muzzled for 2.5 years. The point was, and it was a good one, to keep Kohberger's jury pool from becoming tainted with too much information, both good and bad, that may or may not be allowed into evidence. But since Kohberger saved the state and the rest of us the trouble and expense of a trial, the judge said that he can no longer justify gagging all of that information from being made public to you and to me. And furthermore, he said, at this point, quote, the rights of the public to information in this case are paramount. And I say, finally. Even the prosecutor was on board, but not so much Kohberger's defense team.
I would only say, Your Honor, as this court is well aware, the publicity in this case is so extensive and emotions are already so high that adding fuel to the fire of media interviews or a rush to interview people as they leave the courthouse or enter the courthouse would only increase the concerns that the defense has. And even though the plea has a specific sentence attached to it, as this court is well aware, things happen in plea hearings and, sentencing hearings. And to minimize the possibility of that, we request that this order stay in place.
Didn't win. Not really, anyway. Very interesting. Things happen at sentencing hearings, like withdrawing your plea. Yeah, that can happen. But if it's any consolation to Team Kohberger, there is also the separate issue of literally hundreds and hundreds of sealed court documents, not one of which will be automatically unsealed with the ending of this gag. Most of it will be public eventually, but each will be reread with many parts redacted, and that is going to take time, like months. And it won't even start to happen until after Kohberger is sentenced on Wednesday of next week. And until that moment when the gavel comes down on his case and he's led away to his forever cell, Kohberger could technically try to wiggle out of his guilty plea. Or he could file appeals that he gave up his right to file. I want to read to you part of an email that prosecutors sent to the families of the victims. Okay, so there is Supreme Court case law that states if a defendant who has waived appeal directs his attorney to file a notice of appeal, the attorney is required to file notice. This does not change the fact that defendant has waived his right to obtain any relief on appeal and that any appeal should be dismissed. Similarly, while the defendant has waived all rights to appeal, he could still claim ineffective assistance from his defense counsel. The state is not concerned about this possibility or the possibility that the defendant would have any success if he did explore either of these avenues. This basically means, careful, we are not at the end of the line yet, and Bryan Kohberger could still turn the screws on us before the gavel comes down. So I'm going to stop here and bring in our national correspondent, Brian Enton, who's been following this case since the beginning. So it's interesting, Brian, as we were all watching this today, I think a lot of people were confused when they heard that Bryan Kohberger could appeal still. We all heard it, he had waived his right to appeal. But it's interesting that the defense attorney for Kohberger says that lifting this gag order could affect the sentencing. Can you explain it?
Yeah, I mean, you picked up on the same exact quote of the entire hearing. This was the thing that I picked up on the most. Things happen at sentencing. I thought, what exactly does that mean? And she wasn't really that specific. I think what she meant, and she basically said it, is emotions are high. It's already a very, very emotional time for the families. It's going to be an emotional day. And what is really the point of, bringing more out before the sentencing next Wednesday? But things happen at sentencing. I still don't really know what things exactly that she's talking about. And she said, you know what I'm talking about, but I don't know what she was talking about. So that was interesting. In terms of the appeal, this is something that has concerned the families all along. He signed the agreement that says he's not going to appeal, but the Supreme Court has ruled that everybody has a right to an appeal, and he could later on say, I didn't have a good lawyer, I got bad advice, and I didn't know necessarily what I was signing, and he could try to appeal that way. Granted, it would be tough. I mean, this is Bryan Kohberger. He was a criminology, getting his PhD. He clearly knew exactly what he was signing, and that would probably come out. So the chances are low, but it's possible.
Yeah, that collective cacophony that you hear in the background is all of America laughing about the idea that he would even raise the issue that his attorney, Ann Taylor, was ineffective. I have never seen an attorney be more effective on his behalf, including just yesterday, Brian Enton. Yesterday, she filed a motion saying, you know what? I think we need to be careful here. I've got to protect the process. I have to be a good lawyer and make sure that he is protected all the way through to sentencing, including the issue of ineffective assistance of counsel. So sorry, Brian, if that's your idea, it's a stinker. You're never going to prevail there. Okay, the thing that also stood out to me in some of the motion that Ann Taylor and the defense team filed was she pointed to danger. She said there are threats to Bryan Kohberger, to Bryan Kohberger's family, and to court staff. Didn't say what the threats were or who among the court staff, but I found that pretty surprising.
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody involved in it. Talk to the victims' families. They're all getting threats. They get harassed all the time. There's these conspiracy theorists out there. There's awful people online. You see them, Ashleigh. So I wasn't that surprised by that. Again, I don't know if you heard this, but the judge made a point of saying, we're going to make sure that Bryan Kohberger's parents have security when they come in, and they'll come in a special way, and we'll make sure to protect them. I know for a fact that not all the victims' families got that kind of treatment. So the judge has really gone out of his way, I think, to protect the Kohberger parents. And I'm sure they have received threats. Everybody in the case has.
I think Bill Thompson, the prosecutor, as well as the judge, he said people reached out to him directly. He said that at the appeal hearing. And can I just say, Bryan, you and I probably both are on the same page with this, but anybody who's suggesting that Bryan Kohberger's parents should be threatened or his sisters should be threatened, there is one person who did this horrible thing. There is one person responsible for this horrible thing, and it is Bryan Kohberger. And anybody who takes it out on anyone else is not doing this democracy of ours any favors. That is the face you should hate. That is the man who is fully responsible for what happened. Bryan, I know you're going to be busy until sentencing, so thank you for this update. I do appreciate it. Also, I want to let you know here that Steve Goncalves, whose daughter Kaylee died when Kohberger used a K-bar knife to kill her, he has fiercely opposed the plea agreement that spared that killer's life. And he wanted all of the case files and the court orders released before the murderer's sentencing, so that he and his family could know what happened to Kaylee and then prepare and craft their victims' impact statements accordingly. And that's not going to happen now. He's not getting that information. And he's angry with the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, for the way that all of this has played out, even today's quote-unquote unsealing. And I had an opportunity to speak just a little earlier today with Steve Goncalves for my Drop Dead Serious podcast. Here's our conversation. Steve, what was your reaction to the decision today that the gag order will be lifted, but the motions won't be unsealed? Not yet, anyway.
You know, we requested for basically Kaylee, what happened to Kaylee. So I know her sisters want to do a victim statement and address the exacts, some of the things that happened to her. And they basically wouldn't share any information with us on, you know, what happened to her. So I'm pretty used to how ridiculous, you know, not just a gag order, but sealing something that has nothing to do with the victim's rights. It's all about, hate to say it, but it is a lot to do with the media and people being put on cameras and not knowing what to say, or things coming out that they didn't mean to say, or just didn't have a good explanation of what was going on. So they wrap this seal thing around, trying to pretend like they're, you know, trying to protect people and doing all that. But they gave out people's initials at the very beginning. So it's just a dog and pony show that we're supposed to pretend like, you know, like there's top secret information inside these docs. It's pretty gross, and we're fed up with it, and we're glad that it's over. And we just, you know, you only got one time to be able to be a victim's advocate and say what you need to say and to address the, you know, the courtroom and everyone in Idaho. And they're not gonna let us know exactly what happened. So it's just terrible. You're gonna go in there, we're gonna make statements, and we're like, we don't want to say anything inaccurate. We want to make sure everything we say is exactly truthful. And, you know, it's one of those times where they could bend the rules, but they don't.
You know, I seem to recall there was some discussion that the judge was going to meet with families and tell you privately things that were going to be released in the gag order. Is that still a possibility, or is there no discussion of that?
There's no discussion of that. We just, Shannon just sent him an email and just said, are you really going to make my clients go through 3 different agencies to get this information that they want to see, like go through Freedom of Information Acts for the state of Idaho, for the county of Latah, and then, you know, there's federal ones as well. There's even other states. So it's like they could make it happen, but clearly the willpower isn't there. I don't think they really want anyone talking to the media and questioning. You know, remember these people said that it was a crime of passion, it was targeted, and you know, it was an isolated event. All this language, and then they even said, you're gonna have to trust us. You're just gonna have to wait and trust us. And now we've waited, and it's like, no. Well, there was no connection whatsoever that we could establish. So how do you get isolated? How do you get targeted? So I think it's more about covering up some of the mistakes that they made. They don't want to talk about destroying the crime scene and how questionable that was. So they just say, well, we're gagged. And now that the gag's over, you guys aren't going to know exactly what we were talking about during the last 2.5 years.
Was there any contact made or any overture at all from the prosecutor's office, the victim's rights advocate that's supposed to be associated with you, about the process going forward now in order to find out more information? Have they at least guided you? Will you have a better shot at getting information than someone like me?
No, they don't like us. They don't like the fact that we question their authority. They don't like the fact that we talk to you guys right now. So I don't think they'll help us at all. They'll try to make it as most difficult as possible because we bring a huge spotlight. You know, if we're gonna read it, we're gonna explain it to people how we understand it, and I don't think they want that attention. And that's probably why most of them have already retired. So. Yeah, I don't think we're going to get any help. We don't have a victim's advocate. She's bound by the rules of that court. So if the judge tells her to shut her mouth and don't talk about it, there's an open investigation of the leak, and she's a part of that team. She can't talk to us. We brought up the leak in court January 13th. Gray accused that office of leaking the information, and ever since then, we've been able to prove that we knew about the sheath and the DNA, CODIS hit, all that stuff before. And you think if there's an investigation, why hasn't anyone ever called us and asked us where we heard it? You know, so there is no investigation going on. They're lying to Hitler if they're telling him there's an investigation. There's no investigation going on because the first person who told you that there was leaks and proved to you by telling you what they've heard, that eventually becomes part of your case. You know, the sheep, we knew about the sheep before it was. We knew about the white car before they released it. They never came and asked us who told us that information. They didn't even try. So,
who was it?
Oh, I would never. I'm not going to give that information out. You know, I really respect the people that actually reached out and tried to help us. They're awesome mothers and fathers, and they cared about their community, and they wanted to make sure that this was done the right way. And so, yeah, we did know some stuff, but I respect all those people, and I would never give out their information. And they're all safe.
Understanding.
Every person I've ever talked to.
It makes perfect sense. You got a loyalty to those who loved you and cared for you throughout this horrible process. In the interim, I kept thinking along the way there would be things that you know that we don't know, and that you were sworn to secrecy because of the gag order or any other reasons. Is there information you know now that I haven't known and the rest of us haven't known up until today?
Most of the information we found out were just people calling up. I've had other officers call us up and just say, I don't know what just happened in the court today, but I don't support it. People so angry at what was happening in that courtroom that they would literally pick up their phone and call us and say, this is what's on Bryan's phone. This is what he was searching. This individual was sexually motivated. I don't care what Thompson said. They've got a plan for him. They've got a job role for that man. And it's not every day that you get somebody who wants to be a police officer, is dying to be a police officer, is literally talking to them every single day about how he was going to be a police officer. it's not every day you get a master's degree in criminology that is going to go into prison, and they're going to leverage that. That's what they're interested in. They're not interested in him being locked up in 23 hours of solitaire where he's not going to be able to have any influence. They want him to go in there and actually have influence and work with them.
And be a resource for crime fighting in the future?
Yeah. His fantasy was to be an officer, or the earliest one was like a Green Beret or something like that, a ranger. So this guy's had like these grandeur visions of himself since he was just a little kid. And I think one of the first things he told the officers when they arrested him in Pennsylvania was like, let's get a cup of coffee. I'm working on my criminology PhD, and I'd like to interview you. It's like, this guy wants to be a cop or wants to be somebody of importance. He always has been, and that was part of the reason why we were trying to get them to take that into account and not plead with him. Don't give him the position of power. Basically, dictate the terms to him and say we're not going to accept this unless you prove who you are.
Still fascinated by the comment he made upon arrest. Have you arrested anyone else? Thinking, is he throwing a red herring in? Is he really curious about other possible suspects? But I'm very curious about what you just mentioned, that coming out of hearings, there would be people who would call you and say, I don't like what's happening in that courtroom. I know what's on his phone. I know. What did you learn from those phone calls without divulging who it was who called?
Just weird porn fetishes, but two of the fetishes were in that room. Drunk, passed out girls and gagging girls. And those are two things that were part of that crime scene. For Thompson to say that there was no sexual assault, of course there wasn't. He didn't have enough time. Somebody came up there. But why are you defending somebody who just killed 4 people? Why are you not even making him stand in the courtroom and admit that he killed 4 people? I mean, it's upside down world sometimes when you go in those court systems and they're literally, oh, you've been so respectful. You can sit down when you plead guilty, with a yes and no answer. So we're just glad to be done with it. We're glad to move on.
When you said drunk, passed out girls, gagging girls, was there something that happened at the crime scene involving gagging that you heard?
Yeah. That's what we've heard. That's why we want to get all these facts straight. So we don't want to have a statement that isn't accurate. But when you have a prosecution that just is okay with covering everything up and not telling you what's going on, it's hard to be accurate. And they've criticized us for not being accurate on certain things. And it's because we're not getting the facts. Parents shouldn't have to beg to know what happened to their kid the last 24 hours of their life. We figured out everything that we could. We got the grub truck video before they did. We got the white car. We got the 112 surveillance even before they got it. We were the ones that tell them to go to these cameras and pull them off. I'm sure they already were going to do that anyway, but we got it before they did. So they were just concerned that they weren't in control and we knew too much stuff, and it's unfortunate.
Did someone with the investigation describe that Kaylee or Maddie was gagged during this horrible crime?
I was told that by somebody in I can give that out. That was Babbitt. That was Babbitt who gave that information.
What did she say? And I just, for our viewers right now, Kathy Babbitt.
There was some damage around her mouth right here, like somebody had pressed in and tried to keep her quiet.
That is information we had not heard before. Just want to let you know something before I mention anything more about Kathy Babbitt, the coroner. I've just gotten confirmation that Steve and the family will all be at the sentencing. There was some question about it before. He was so upset at the appellate or the hearing for the plea bargain that he walked out. And there was some concern that maybe he had a conflict with his child's school. And now I'm being told they've got a plan to reserve 10 seats for the Goncalves family in the courtroom. for sentencing next week, and that Steve and his wife Christy and Kaylee's sister Olivia plan to make statements. Now back to the coroner, Kathy Mabbitt, the Latah County coroner, somebody we spoke with shortly after the murders, you might remember. I remember her confirming to us on this show that all of the kids had been stabbed repeatedly with a large hunting knife and that they were in their beds when they were murdered. I just want to say my great thanks to Steve Goncalves. You could hear he was on his way out of the house, so he did that interview as a real favor. You can hear the rest of our conversation on my Drop Dead Serious podcast, which drops literally right this minute. Okay, so the gag order in the Idaho murders did not cover everybody. And some people actually did talk. A lot of them talked to Vicki Ward, an investigative journalist working with author James Patterson, who may have found the answers to some of the biggest questions of all. Like, why did Kohberger choose the victims that he did? Vicki joins me live next when we come back. Lifting the gag order in the case against Bryan Kohberger means it is only a matter of months before 2.5 years of closely guarded information comes pouring out. But one Vicki Ward does not like to wait. She is an investigative journalist who spent months in Moscow, Idaho, interviewing more than 300 people on the fringes of the student murders. And what she learned is laid out in her brand new book, co-written with renowned mystery writer James Patterson. The book is called The Idaho 4, An American Tragedy, and it came out just this week. Vicki Ward is kind enough to join me now live. Vicki, it's good to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here. I don't know if you could just hear the interview that I did with Steve Goncalves, but he mentioned something that I don't believe anybody has heard before, and that is that he was told information that at the murder scene where his daughter Kaylee died, he said that it appeared that she had injuries to the side of her face as though she had been gagged, as though a hand had perhaps been stuck into her mouth to gag her. Did you find any information like that or any other details like that about how these murders were carried out?
Well, there's one line in the book, Ashleigh, that references that Kaylee woke up. I mean, it's a very subtle line, but it's there. So I knew that Kaylee had woken up and that there had been a struggle and that her wounds were much more significant than Maddie's. I have to say it was heartbreaking, actually, watching your interview with Steve Goncalves right now. You know, I've got to know him very well, as I know you have, and I know Bryan Entin has. And to see him look defeated almost this evening was I thought, very, very sad, actually.
I'm glad you said that, because honestly, I just said to my team that I'm here in the studio with how upset I am to learn details at the same time that he is. I just feel like these parents deserve so much better. They deserve to know what happened to their children before I do, before you do, before the public does. And it just doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
Right. Well, and, you know, I think what the book does is lay out very clearly in a narrative way just how frustrating and difficult this whole process has been for the Goncalves family. And sometimes, you know, in book form, it's easier to sort of understand because, you know, we have a chapter of when there is the family sitting in their living room and, you know, they've got lots of kids. They start to get footage on their cell phones. They can see the police tape going up around 1122 King Road, and yet they're not hearing anything from the authorities. They sit there for hours until there's a knock on the door, and then all they're told is that Kaylee and her best friend Maddie are dead. And then you have a scene where Olivia, Kaylee's older sister, and her husband and 2 young children drive through the night from California, and Olivia is working her phone, trying to look at Kaylee's phone records, get in touch with everyone she was in touch with and Maddie was in touch with in that last 24 hours, getting the footage of the grub track video. And when Olivia walks into the Goncalves family home, you know, almost a day later, she's stunned to find that her parents still don't have a point person at Moscow PD. And it's then even a struggle for her to find someone to hand over the information she's worked all night getting. And so you can see this frustration building right from the beginning. And I must say, I was startled to learn really how few rights the victims' families had in this case.
Yeah.
Really shocked, actually.
Super, super painful to live through this for 2.5 years. You discovered information about why the surviving 2 roommates, God bless them, who have just been assailed so ferociously and unfairly online, but why they waited so long to call 911. Tell our viewers and anybody out there who's a doubter why that was.
Well, one of them was in the basement. So and I, having looked at that house long and hard when it was up, there's no way she would have heard anything. Dylan Mortensen opened her door, did hear sounds. And, we now know that what had happened was Bryan Kohberger went straight to Maddie Mogan's bedroom. Most of the victims' families and friends, I think you've reported this by now, Ashleigh, believe that, Maddie was the target. Kaylee Goncalves had moved out of that house, packed her stuff. She was only there by chance. She'd gone to show Maddie her car, and it was a big football game day weekend, which is why she was staying over, and Kohberger found her in the bed with Maddie. Xana Kernodle was up because she had just received a DoorDash food delivery. Bryan Kohberger had to come down the stairs to go past Xana's bedroom. And he clearly saw her, which is why Xana was found not in her bed, but on the floor, feet first, falling back into the room, because they clearly had a struggle. Ethan Chapin, her boyfriend, was fast asleep in the bed behind her. And presumably Bryan Kohberger looked, Ethan Chapin was a very tall, very athletic guy. And presumably he thought he posed a risk just because of his size. It would be then coming out of that situation, which clearly Dylan Mortensen, who was half asleep, had a big, big day partying, heard something, and she comes to her door, which Kohberger also then has to go past on his way out of the house. And she opens and shuts the door, and she sees what she thinks is a firefighter. That's all, and she's like, am I hallucinating? Did I drink too much? He's got a black mask, and he's dressed all in black, and he's carrying what looks to her like a black vacuum. And yes, she's terrified, but she's also, it's not the first time she's sort of seen things, after a big night out, big day out, drinking. Yeah. This was a house. This is big deck.
Honest to God, Vicki, this is what I've been saying since the get-go. Anybody who thinks that she saw a quadruple murderer is crazy. No. These kids would have thought it was a party goer and he creeps me out, and that would have been their greatest fear. I have to leave it there, but I would love to have you back. There's so much more I want to talk to you about. Can you come back?
Absolutely, Ashleigh.
Vicki Ward,
Anytime.
It's great to have you. Thank you so much. Again, you've got to check out that book. It just dropped on Monday, The Idaho 4, An American Tragedy. Coming up next, a huge development in a murder mystery in a quiet community in Maine. Like, when's the last time you heard the words murder, mystery, and Maine all in the same sentence? There's now a suspect in custody 2 weeks after Sunshine Stewart was savagely killed while out on her paddleboard. But why is the community being kept in the dark about who they caught? Details next. It was 2 weeks ago today that the body of Sunshine Stewart was discovered on an island in a pond in the small town of Union, Maine. Stewart was 48 years old and a Renaissance woman, at times in her life a boat captain, a contractor, and a marine biologist. She loved the outdoors, and hours before she was murdered, she set out on a paddleboard from her campground. And she was by herself. We brought you this story last week, and tonight we have an update in the way of an arrest. Late last night, the state police in Maine brought in a 17-year-old boy suspected of being connected to the murder of Sunny Stewart. And at the same time, they announced exactly how she died. She'd been both strangled and beaten. But because of the suspect's age, we don't know exactly what it is the boy is alleged to have done. Don't even know his name. Sam Patten is on the story. He's the managing editor at the website called the Maine Wire. He joins me live with the latest reporting. I'd feel really uncomfortable for the people in that community. What are the police telling people?
Thanks for having me, Ashleigh. Very little has come out about this case over the last 2 weeks. And what we learned this morning is that a suspect has been arrested. I think that's a relief to the community that he's a minor, that he's 17 years old, and the cause of death, which had been withheld up until now. Other than that, there are not a lot of facts that are coming out at this time. So it's people are still guessing as to who the actual individual is, though perhaps we'll find that out before too long after the Attorney General decides whether they're going to charge them as a minor or an adult.
So do we even know, Sam, if it's going to be a murder charge or what they're alleging this 17-year-old mystery boy is apparently did to Sunny?
We don't know what the charging is going to be, but it was clearly a homicide, and it was clearly an intentional killing based on everything that is known. So there was some speculation early on, was this an accident? But everything points to the fact that she was killed and that there was an attempt made to conceal her body. So clearly there was some form of not only intentionality, but guilt and trying to hide from the crime.
Sam, I've got 10 seconds left, but there's a report that this is a kid who was spending the summer with his family in the area of the pond. Do we know if that's true?
That is what we're hearing. Sonny was staying at a campground on the pond, which is the only access that's not a camp. So chances are that this individual may also have been staying at that campground with his family if they did not have a camp there themselves. He probably had seen her and possibly stalked her, eventually luring her to her death. But that is something that we're just speculating about at this time. Very few facts are known.
All allegations. Yep, all allegations till we know more. Sam, you'll have to come back. Thanks so much for this.
Thanks for having me.
Still ahead tonight, it is not a sin to be camera shy, and it's certainly not a crime, but the reasons somebody might shy away from, say, a Jumbotron could be both sins and crimes. Case in point, the tech CEO caught canoodling with an employee who was not his wife.
Yeah. Oh, look at these two. All right, come on. You're okay? Oh, what?
You won't believe who the tech CEO is blaming for being outed while cheating. That's next. When is it really, really uncool to be caught on the kiss cam? When the person you're canoodling isn't your spouse.
Yeah. Oh, look at these two. All right, come on. You're okay? Oh, what? Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, looks like Chris Martin got it right. It's an affair. And that dude is blaming the Jumbotron for outing the affair. What are your rights when you're in a big fat arena jam-packed with eyeballs? Hint, it's not exactly what CEO Romeo wants to hear. We'll tell you all about it next. I don't know who needs to hear this, but corner booths in dimly lit restaurants exist for a reason. If you're out with somebody you shouldn't be out with, or shouldn't be with in general, corners and candles and giant menus are your friends. A Coldplay concert, not so much. When Coldplay announced that they were playing in Boston, Andy Byron got the bright idea that it would make for a terrific date night with his girlfriend, Kristen Cabot. Bad idea, Andy, because you're married, and so is Kristen, to other people. As a double whammy, Andy's also the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company called Astronomer, and his girlfriend is the head of HR. Unfortunately for them, Coldplay has started using a jumbotron and spotlighting celebrities and other interesting-looking fans in the audience. And Andy and Kristen seemed to fit the bill.
Yeah. Oh, look at these two. All right, come on. You're okay? Oh, what? Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy. I'm not quite sure.
I think the girl on the left knew. And just like that, life as this budding couple knew it was over. Apart from the obvious trouble this causes at home, again, they're both married to other people, these two are corporate officers, so they may have to answer to a board of directors, too. But lucky for them, Massachusetts repealed its adultery law back in 2018. Unlucky for Andy, his wife reportedly has dropped his last name on her social media accounts. And late today, Mr. Byron put out a statement lamenting, and I quote, a deeply personal mistake playing out on a very public stage. He vows, quote, to take accountability. But he also finds it troubling that, in his words, what should have been a private moment became public without my consent. To which I say, listen up, Andy. That packed arena where you canoodled your mistress is a very public place. Not the corner booth at Chez Pierre, which, by the way, is also a public place. As your lawyers have no doubt informed you, you have no expectation of privacy when you are out in public. And jumbotrons are just an extension of the tens of thousands of eyeballs that work perfectly well in an arena and could see you plain as day. Next time, maybe do the Vida la Vida somewhere else. Okay, folks, I mentioned it earlier. I'll mention it again. Check out Drop Dead Serious for my exclusive interview with Steve Goncalves as the gag order lifts, but life doesn't change for him. Cuomo's next.